Ladies and gentlemen, it's good to see a couple friendly faces or familiar faces in the audience this evening. I'm here to give a little bit of story about Ortac, and in particular with respect to our latest investment in Zambia. We do have other projects and investments, in projects in Slovakia and investments in Eritrea, but in the 20 minutes that I have here this evening, I won't be able to cover all of them. However, I will go into a bit more detail on Zambia because this is one that we invested in March, and there's very little out there in the market about it. I think it's an exciting opportunity, and I think you'll feel the same way when we're finished here. A little bit about where we are, or where the project lies. It's in the northwestern part of Zambia. It's in an area which is now known as the Domes region in northwest Zambia. It's an area where in the last 10 years you've had 3 big mines come into production, and these mines today constitute 80% of Zambia's copper production. You have on the Solwezi Dome over here, it is Kansanshi, which is First Quantum's mine, and I think they're producing around about 200,000 to 300,000 tons of copper a year. On the Mombezi Dome, we have Lumwana, which is Barrick's mine, and they're producing around about 100,000 tons of copper a year. And last year, on this side of the Kabombo Dome, you have First Quantum that they got their Trident project, which is a copper mine as well as a nickel mine. And the copper mine, Sentinel, has gone into production, and the nameplate production capacity of that mine is about 300,000 tons of copper a year, and that went into production last year. Where the company that we've invested in, Zamsort's license lie, this is the license here. It's a 1,000 square kilometer exploration license, but more interestingly, there is a 4 square kilometer mining license over a copper clearing which has been mined intermittently for the last 10 years. We entered into a transaction with Zamsort whereby we subscribed initially in the form of a convertible loan and a call option, and at the moment we've got an option to go to 20%. We've put in the $600,000 for the convertible. We're in the process now finalizing the next bit of money to go in to take our stake up to just under 20%. Zamsort, parallel to our money going in, has raised money from quite a high net worth individual, and that individual has put in $2 million, or in the process of putting $2 million. I think he's put in about 1.5, and another probably $500,000 to go. The Calibre copper cobalt project is a deposit that's been mined, as I said, intermittently for the last 10 years. When I say mining, it's not mining in the sense that we know. It's mining in sort of a local indigenous way, and the mining license has just been renewed, and the government has given the company a shake-up and said, go on and sort yourselves out. The reason why it has been mined in the way it has been is that the large-scale prospecting license was only granted to them last year after an 8-year court battle. So I'll get into those details. So in the short term, what they're doing at the moment, they're screening the material they're mining, and they're shipping that to a local solvent extraction facility in the copper belt. They're shipping it 300 kilometers. It's not a very efficient way of doing things, but at the moment, it's the best they could do for the situation they were in, and it covered the cost of some of the 20-odd locals that they had on site. So in the short term, what Zamsort are building themselves up to, and they've already started doing that, is to actually put up a copper and cobalt hydroxide cake plant up on site. I'll get into the details of that a little bit shortly. And then in the medium term is obviously to prove up the additional oxide resources that are clearly in the area to justify going all the way to putting an S6CW plant on site. So that then would enable Zamsort to produce copper metal on site. As far as the license area is concerned, we've identified it as probably one of the most prospective ground in the copper belt at the moment, and I'll give you the reasons for that shortly. It's 40. The license area is on the other side of the dome to the Sentinels mine. The geology is very much similar. In terms of the copper belt, the easy deposits are found in association with these domes, and these domes are in effect geology 101. They're basement rocks. Sediments have been deposited on them, and there's a group of sediments known as the Rhone sequence, which hosts the copper and cobalt mineralization in the copper belt. And the brown strip that you see there is the lower Rhone, and the green that you see there is the upper Rhone. So geologically, it's got the right address. When you go there, you can actually see copper mineralization on surface. They are mining copper mineralization, so we know there is copper there. We just don't know how much. So as I said, this is a table just summarizing what I just said about the various mines that have gone into production in the last 10 years. So Kansanshi in 2005, Lumwana 2009, and First Quantum Sentinel in 2014. So in the last 10 years, 3 big mines, 80% of Zambia's copper production. And Zambia today has just been superseded by the Congo as being the second largest producer in Africa in terms of copper, and they really want to get that position back. And so there's a big drive now to actually get this project going. A little bit of history about the project itself. It was discovered in 1928, probably by a Scottish geologist by that surname. The Rhone Selection Trust did some diamond drilling in the area in the late 50s, and that core is still available for viewing, and I'll tell you a little story about that shortly as well. And they were mainly focused on sulfides, because at that time the technology wasn't around for actually being able to treat oxide, copper, and cobalt mineralization. And then in the 70s, Agip explored for uranium and gold on this license area, and there's the Calabar River which flows through the license area, and they drill. I've seen reports where they've drilled up to 2,000 parts per million uranium, which is about 0.2%, and about up to 9 grams a ton gold. But that at this stage it's interesting, but it's not the focus of the company. Where the real work started happening was when Anglo and Equinox formed a joint venture called the ZamAnglo joint venture, and that covered both parts of the dome, so the eastern side as well as the western side. And they did a lot of good geological work, geochem, geophysics, also did some scout drilling. And then in 2001, Anglo, as they usually do, they pulled out of the market just at the wrong time. And they pulled out of Zambia. And in 2005, Zamsort applied for a 4 square kilometer small mining license over the Calabar deposit itself, which was granted. And then in late 2006, it applied for a much larger exploration license area than it currently has. And that's when the problem started with Zamsort. They were able to resolve the small mining license quite effectively, but the large-scale prospecting license required them to go through the whole court process all the way through to the Attorney General, which is in effect the Supreme Court, and ruled in their favor in August last year, and so therefore it can no longer be challenged. And that's when the shackles were released, and Zamsort were able now to go out there and and see what investors they could get into this. I'd just like to come back to the ZamAnglo joint venture, because I think this is quite an interesting slide. When they were working this license area, they ranked the targets 1 to 30 on that Kabombo project, so both sides of the dome. The targets that you see, the names that you see there in red, are the ones that fall in the current license area. And you'll notice the top 7 are actually in that license area, and 9 out of the 30 are in that license area. Number 22, Kalumbila Northeast, is what is today Sentinel. So back then, when Zamanglo were prospecting, they only estimated that at Columbia Northeast, there's 6 million tons of ore. Today, First Quantum have already proved up 1.2 billion tons of ore. Calibre at that time, they estimated there was going to be 150 million tons of ore. At this point, we don't know how much is there because there's only been scout drilling. There hasn't been a systematic exploration drill program carried out on this license area. So in terms of working on the license area, it's obviously to carry out a regional geochemistry and possibly geophysical program, and then the second phase would be more detailed. And that'll be over the next 3 to 5 years on this license area. And all things going well, hopefully we should be able to establish quite a sizable resource. Briefly, a little bit of the geology. The oxides are hosted by something that we call a saprolite, which is in effect a weathered rock. And then underlying that, there's a metamorphosed dolomitic rocks that host the sulfide mineralization. And in Calibre itself, although they're mining the oxides, in the footwall, you find that there, and that's the sulfides, and that there's peppered with chalcopyrite. So already we know that there's sulfide mineralization. All these big deposits, by the way, are sulfide mineralization, because obviously the weathering profile doesn't tend to go down more than 100 meters. So today, if you go to Calibre, this is what you see. A 50-ton excavator. The red soil that you see above there is the laterite, and that's about 3 to 5 meters thick. And underneath that is the saprolite. And you've got an excavator at the moment. It's a 50-ton excavator. No drilling and blasting. It's just free digging. At the moment, obviously focused on the oxide copper, which is mainly in the form of malachite, and the cobalt, which is mainly in the form of hydrogenite. Because of the history of the project, there has been no resource drilling, there's no mine plan, they're just following the saprolite. They have a little laboratory on site, which is a little tent, and they do titration, so they do about 10 samples a day, which is just enough for the volume of material that they're mining, and then that there covers the cost of running the site. There is a non-code compliant resource that's been estimated there, and that has been estimated based on the historical scout drilling programs. To be honest with you, it's not something that you could hang your hat on. It has to all be redone, and that'll have to be after a proper drilling program. And as I mentioned, the material is being mined, screened, and then sometimes washed to upgraded. So at the moment where they're mining, it's about grading between 1 to 2% copper and about 0.2% cobalt. And after they've screened it, you can see the stockpiles there that's running about 3.5% copper. And then they can do a wet screening afterwards, which further upgrades it to 8%. And that's what they really need to get it to at the moment to transport it the 300 kilometers to Solwezi to actually process it and make a little bit of money. So even today, when you go on site, you'll see these stockpiles there, and that there has an in-situ value sitting there of $6 million just on the copper alone, let alone the cobalt. So the opportunity here is obviously to start small, develop the resource, and then put in a proper facility in place. So we've had to go back to basics. So we've had to send surveyors out there to survey the site, had to get geologists out there to do the geological mapping, do the geological sections. We've had to confirm the metallurgical assumptions, because at the moment, all they know is they're sending it to the plant and it's being beneficiated. They don't actually know, what percentage of it is coming out. And so we've gone out there and we collected some, sent a metallurgist out there, he collected some metallurgical samples, and those there were grading from that pit that you saw there about 1.7% copper and about 0.23% cobalt. And that's all oxide. These bags here are what they send to Solwezi, and those bags are running 8%. So when they've bagged enough material, they get the low bed in, load 20, 30 tons, and then they ship that off to Solwezi. And that's the laboratory that I was telling you about in the bottom there. So it's a very primitive, basic tent camp. It works for what they're trying to do, but now to take it to the next step is to put a proper facility on site. That's what the government wants to see. The government wants to see that this year. They renewed the license last month, and they've told Zamsort, we want to see you building a mine, and we want to see something up by the end of this year. And so when we sat down with them, we said, look, there's no ways we could justify a solvent extraction plant. There's just not enough information available, although it's obviously a lot of oxide material there. You just wouldn't be able to finance $5, $10, $20 million to put up a solvent extraction plant. So plan B is to put a cake plant, and it's a similar process to solvent extraction, where you're using acid to dissolve the metal into solution. But the back end is different in that you're not actually going all the way to metal. All you're doing is you're taking that acidic solution, and by sequentially, you're doing a sequential precipitation process. So you're increasing the pH of the acidic solution, and as you do that, the metals start to drop out of solution. So at a pH of 2, everything is in solution. At a pH of 3, iron will start dropping out, and that you can create a ferrous hydroxide, which has absolutely no value. At a pH of 4, copper starts to drop out, and that there you produce a copper hydroxide, and at a pH of 9, cobalt and nickel drop out, and you produce a cobalt hydroxide. So that's the short-term plan. It's a small plant. We've done some preliminary numbers. In actual fact, our technical director is flying back from Zambia today. He met up with a mining contractor. There's actually a mining contractor at Sentinel, which is 40 kilometers away, with mining equipment, brand new excavators and trucks, and he's willing to bring them across and start. So there's no capital costs on the mining side, and the plant side is just your leaching tanks, and so there's not really too much in terms of capital equipment that needs to be put in place. And it's a small volume at the moment as well. I mean, it's only 35,000 tons of ore a month. We've assumed these grades, and as I said, we've sampled the pit as running 1.7% copper. We've assumed 1%, and was 0.22% cobalt, and there's 0.2. And based on those numbers, that facility there would be doing around about 300 tons per month of copper and 50 tons per month of cobalt. Net revenue, I mean, this number, is continually being updated, but at the moment it's sitting at around about $500,000 per month, based on a $5,200 copper price and a $30,000 a ton cobalt price, and that was as of Monday. But thanks to the Chinese, I think the copper price has dropped $100 or so today. I mentioned something about the core, and this is core that was drilled by the Rowan Selection Trust in the 50s. I mean, I think we all know the story of Zambia. There was a period when they nationalized everything, and obviously the exploration data and information was nationalized as well. So in Kalalushi, all the core, historical core from all the sites on the copper belt is stored. Anyone can go there and pay your money and get the core out. In actual fact, the first time that Zamsort saw their core was actually when we went up there and asked them to pull it out. And what was interesting to note was that it was clear that someone else had been looking at the core. And I mean, this is a picture here. You can see this core has been split, and the yellow that you see there is chalcopyrite. And we asked the lady there who's in charge of it, and she told us that 3 weeks ago, I won't mention any names, but one of the majors had been there with the geologists, and they brought their own sampling equipment and cut the core and sent it off. And 4 months prior to that, another major had been there. So it's ground that the majors know. If you're going to find a big deposit and you want to find it easily, this is the next place you're going to find it. And the majors have approached Zamsort prior to us getting involved, but their strategy is quite clear. They don't want to actually work with a major because they don't want to be tied in for the next 15, 20 years. They want to build it up to a position where they sell it to a major. And I mean, an example they gave me was that Sentinel was actually Kawara PLC. I don't know if you remember that company. Kawara was sold to, First Quantum purchased Kawara for $260 million in 2009. And that's the sort of thing that Zamsort want to do. So although we tried to enter a transaction where we eventually rolled the whole thing in, they weren't keen to enter along those ways, but we are in a position now where we've earned into 20%, and we're now negotiating to increase that position as well. So in summary, it's something that, you know, hopefully could be pretty cash generative soon. We're pretty sure that the license will deliver a profitable mine, and, you know, I'm pretty sure we also will find a pretty big deposit over time. Whether we get to 1 billion tons, I'm not sure, but I'm certainly optimistic that we could see tens of millions and maybe even hundreds of millions of tons of ore. I will quickly, I know I'm into question time, so I'll just quickly go into Slovakia and Eritrea, and I'll be happy to answer questions as well related to those projects. In Slovakia, we're at a point now where we've rationalized the costs. We're down to a position where we're comfortable, and we are talking to a local group at the moment, but whether something or not will happen, time will tell. It's something that we believe that to move that project forward, it can only be done with the support of a significant local player. In Eritrea, we invested in Andiamo Exploration, a private explorer there, and they've in the process of completing a resource on the Yakubdua project. They've also recently been drilling in the northern part of the license area, and I understand that has been quite successful, and they tested some EM anomalies, and that has come out with some half-decent results, or encouraging results, which bodes quite well for the rest of the license area, because there are a number of these other anomalies in that license area, and I'm pretty sure that apart from what they've already drilled out, there'll be some pretty big discoveries to be made in that license area, particularly if you look at Nefsan, who are sort of 50 kilometers to the north of their license area, and their discoveries are actually heading towards Andiamo's ground. So it's looking quite good for them. I think that's it. Any questions?
Gentleman just there. Thanks. Taking time to build the resource up to maybe sell it on later to a major, it's obviously going to take some time. Every couple of years in Zambia, the area has to be, a certain percentage of the area has to be relinquished. What percentage is that?
50%. But
50?
That is at the discretion of the minister.
Right, so every couple of years, 50% of the
so you have it's 2 years, and then I think there's 3 periods of 2 years, and then a period of 1 year.
All right.
And then it's relinquishing of 50%. But I understand from, I'm telling you third hand here now. I asked that same question because we're starting now a geochem program in September where we've budgeted $200,000, and I felt we needed to be a lot more aggressive. And they said, look, the government wants to see a mine being built. They're sick and tired. They don't want to see more exploration, and they will give us breathing space on exploration if we demonstrate that we're building this mine.
Yeah, but with the price so low, rushing it through is not necessarily an option, is it? I mean, taking your time, maybe waiting for the price to swing would be advantageous. But if you're losing exploration ground while you're waiting, yeah. It's a tough equation.
Yeah, I mean, look, the company was able to renew the license, and given the history that it took them 8 years to get it, I think the government is going to be, from what I understand, the government has said, look, demonstrate that you're serious, and then the rest won't be a problem.
Next question.
Just backing up the gentleman's point a little bit, if there was a way wherein you could increase the cooperation, with Pan-African international organisations, EACS, the Commonwealth, for example, to give yourself a stronger international platform, build bridges with regional governments, not least Tanzania, Zambia, etc., the Congo, particularly in light of the Chinese coming in. They've got elections in Tanzania basically any time. The possibility that Tanzania might veer towards protectionism as opposed to free trade. If there was an opportunity to raise your profile in the relevant areas, give yourself a louder voice, increase your competitiveness and have broader cooperation to diversify your investor base, in principle, would all that be something of interest to you?
It would. I mean, Zamsort is particularly sensitive to exactly what you're saying.
If you want to grab me afterwards, I know how to do it.
Okay. So,
Seriously.
I mean, for example, I know the major shareholder, who's a local Zambian guy, has just spent the whole week with Chief Mamena.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
More questions? Any more hands? Gentleman just here. Whilst we wait for the microphone, your market cap's about £2 million sterling?
Don't be nasty, 2.5, I think.
Oh, sorry. That was yesterday, sorry. How much cash you got in the bank? Can you support the required cash?
We've got cash to move to the next level. However, if we do negotiate then to take an interest further, then we would need more cash. But we are looking at strategic investors at the moment. We are talking to a couple. Let's put it this way: there's a couple, one or two of the groups. They're former Anglo guys, and they came into the meetings with a report this thick on the Calibre mine. So they probably know a little bit more about the project than we do at this point. So I'm quite positive that something will come out of that.
But on the Calibre mine, you showed some numbers there about 500,000 a month.
That's just to satisfy the government that the Zamsort is serious about doing something. The plan would be to actually upgrade that to a solvent extraction facility where you're actually producing cathode, but we can't really do that until we know how much material is there, because then that'll justify that expenditure. I mean, things in Zambia are pretty cheap at the moment, because as you can imagine, things are pretty depressed. I mean, I was quite surprised at the contractor rates, and even more surprised that some of the drilling contractors are quite willing to do some drilling for free if they then get the sole mandate to drill on the rest of the license area. So, yeah.
Interesting times.